Today is the third day of the October-November 1985 retreat. As an announcement, we've brought another straight back chair, which is available for people to bring in here. Back isn't completely straight, it has a nice little rounding for a cushion. Also, to say again, it is most welcome when people bring up questions that a talk has brought up, something that didn't make sense, that one sees differently. Every once in a while someone will apologize for doing this. There's no need to apologize for that. It's very fruitful to, when a problem is really alive and vital and one looks at it right then and there together. Also wish to bring up something somebody mentioned about listening to the breathing. The feeling had been in listening to the talk that there should be no focus on the breathing, not using the breathing as a focus of attention. These words may come out at times unintentionally, but I never talk about what one should do or should not do, but looking at what attention is, what concentration is. This person asked, is this wrong to do this? We're not talking about what is right or what is wrong, but we're looking at it. And can one do this for oneself? If after a hectic day, sitting down at night, one attends to the breathing, that seems to be at times the only room one has in the turbulence of what went on during the day and what seems to keep grinding on, just to listen to the breathing. And if the mind slows down, as this person has observed over a long period of time, what's wrong with it? What's right with it? That's what happens when one observes the breathing carefully. But what can also be watched carefully is one using this attending or listening to the breathing to repress or suppress or get rid of uncomfortable feelings and emotions that may also have arisen during the day and that keep occupying the mind as unfinished business. Because a lot of the thoughts and emotions that keep churning are unfinished business. One has not really looked at the thing simply and straightforwardly, honestly. Not just one's own point of view, but the total situation. So to watch quietly, carefully, whether attending to the breathing or whatever else one may focus the mind on, serves to suppress what is unpleasant or painful to be with. One can see that if one asks that question. Is that what is happening? May not be happening, but it may. And if attending, I'm just using the breathing right now because that is what was brought up. If this way of attending to the breathing serves indeed to suppress painful, upsetting feelings and emotions that were stirred up during the day, then it can become like an addiction, something one needs to have in order not to face the rest of one's life. All of this is open to questioning and open to a quiet observation. Also, one can wonder whether in the beginning there just being this narrow little room for observing the breathing in the midst of just grinding on with a day, whether this narrow attention can open up. One need not lose awareness of the breathing in just allowing all the rest of the stuff to be there. Not to analyze it, explain it, understand it in an intellectual way, but allow it to grind without opposing it, without resisting it, judging it. Just to sit quietly with a turbulent mind and body. Is it possible? Without knowing what to do about it. The mind being in this state of open, not knowing, and yet attending innocently, as it were, to the chaoticness. As one can watch a windstorm and blizzard, rain, lightning, clouds moving through those huge windows out there on the balcony. I thought today we could go more deeply into this whole matter of images. Many people bring it up. And it has been talked about. Probably there isn't a talk that goes by in which images are not mentioned. So to be careful, we talked about it yesterday, not to switch in the brain to this area where memory about this kind of talk is recorded, and therefore either not listen at all or already know it, hum along. The words are already anticipated what she's going to say next, like one hears a very familiar tune. See, it's not at all important to hear the words or to understand the theory of it, but to see image in oneself as it functions, either when one sits alone or the moment there is a relationship with someone else. To really catch it, see it in operation. That is the essential thing. To have a philosophy of images or a theory is not at all valuable. It's a burden, because we have so much of that already. One person at one time said, "Why are images a problem? What's wrong with them? Or is there anything wrong with having images?" This may very well be a theoretical question. And again, it's not talked about it because it's wrong or not having them as right, but to become so sensitive and aware of the power of images in the mind, how they control, direct, suppress our behavior, make it impossible to really see or be aware of what we're doing from moment to moment. We have a little grandson who's now 5 years old. It's been so interesting to observe the emergence of images. One time we were at a playground, then he was maybe 3.5. And he told me that his daddy doesn't like when he uses bad words. But he said, "I'm trying to get better." And as we came home from the playground, his mother was home and she said, "Daddy's on the phone, come talk to him, he wants to talk to you." And Benjamin wasn't into it at that moment, but of course he took the telephone, was handed to him, and he said, "You poo-poo head." Mother was embarrassed, and I don't know how the father felt. So there's the image of being bad, of getting better, and then something still at that point, or maybe at any point, breaking through and just doing exactly what one wants to do at this moment. And then a stern look from mother, and then an expression of guilt in the face of the child. Again, the image of being bad. Maybe at that point the promise wasn't extracted, but maybe if Grandma hadn't been there, would have been, "Will you get better, or won't you do this again?" and promising. So there's the ideal setup, the ideal image of not using bad words, already the image of what is a bad word. And oneself either good, if one suppresses the urge to call somebody by a name, or being bad if one has done it. Same with eating. He happens to be very meager eater except for Pepsi and potato chips and cookies that goes in. Everything else is drudgery. So you can see now, and of course understanding the mother, feeling worried about a very petite, skinny little child, feeling guilty herself, her image as mother as being challenged by the doctor who keeps telling her that Benjamin is in the fourth lowest percentile of children as far as weight all over the United States is concerned. Can you imagine how you feel if you're told that? There comes this image as mother, as good mother. So trying to get him to eat, it has become a constant battle. has nothing to do with the food anymore, with the most natural and enjoyable function, one of the most natural and enjoyable functions. Now it is a matter of being good and eating, or being bad when one doesn't eat, and the guilt in the face and in the movements. When the mother is stern or blames or says you can't have this unless you eat, or you didn't eat this yet so you can't, this whole thing. Imagine, just to take the specific case, to feel that one is good because one has eaten. And one is bad because one has not eaten. And in this case, the child at least has some link of why the mother responds the way she does, what for. But very often, a mother or father being in a bad mood, making the child feel guilty for having done something the child doesn't know what, was just irritable or irritating. So there's the image coming just from looking at the faces of the parents. Parents are mad or in a bad mood, so I must have done something wrong. So the image being very interdependent with how the adult on whom one depends looks at one or treats one, speaks to one. Such a subtle thing, which is not a matter of childhood. It's only where it starts, or where we see it happening first. We don't know when it really starts. But it's going on right now. Everybody knows how dependent one is, how other people look at one, whether with a kind, friendly, approving expression. Then the self-image is boosted, or with a stern, disapproving or indifferent look, and the self-image is deflated. And with that comes either energy boost or a feeling of depression. Going back to childhood, it is utterly amazing how much we habitually tell the child what he is or what she is or what she isn't. Not just in terms of good and bad, but how well a child does something, this enormous amount of compulsive praising, thinking a child won't be able to function zestfully unless he or she is praised for what he or she is doing, which is a totally false assumption. Of course, once one has praise, then a habit is set in motion, and there can be an addiction to getting praise for everything the child does. But if there isn't praise, building something with blocks, or finger painting, or running, walking, bicycling, rolling down a hill, this is sufficient in itself. No one has to praise one for it. It's a joy to a child to do these things. And the praise fractures something in this whole thing, because now it's not just the pure joy of doing it, but looking whether mom is watching and thinks one is cute or terrific or advanced. Let's just watch how much we talk about children in their presence too. How cute they are. Or he's doing this or that, thinking, oh, the child won't hear, but the children hear everything. What is talked about them? The dogs do. You talk about a dog and you see the ears pricking up, looking back and forth between the two speakers. He knows when you talk about him, and children know how they're talked about, and from that they garner a feeling or an image or many images of what they are, what they should be, what they shouldn't be. And this becomes the fortress, the enclosure in which we grow up. It continues, of course, in school. Many images added. The whole thing of comparison I haven't touched upon when one has siblings. From the day one is born, one is compared to one's older sister or brother. Or when the younger sibling arrives, he's so much more calm and placid than he was. All of this is imbibed and constructs images in most children. Then later on, one wonders about all of one's moods. Depressions, feelings of inadequacy or arrogance and pride. There are images installed about what a little boy is like, what a little girl is like, how they should treat each other or shouldn't treat each other. And then as soon as you get into kindergarten, there hangs the American flag, and the Pledge of Allegiance, I think, is already said in kindergarten. If not in kindergarten, then in first grade, with this religious solemnity which impresses itself upon these minds. In Sunday school or wherever one goes to church, there are new images imprinted of being a child of God, a child of Christ, having the Buddha nature, being a link. We had that poem at another Zen center, a poem which was recommended to that wasn't a poem, it was a prayer. It's an unbelievable thing. A prayer to be maybe said at the table with the children, and it started, I am a link in the Buddha's golden chain of love. I will always try to think good thoughts, something like that. Same kind of shoulds. What is the nice child that the Lord Buddha will love? And the bad one. The bad one wasn't mentioned, but that is implied. Not by logic. The child doesn't use logic, but it feels it. And these images serve, I describe them as a fortress, like a prison, but they're often felt as one's security. They are felt as one's security. One is this and that, which has a lot of tradition behind it, a lot of strength behind it. To be told one is an American, which is the richest, most powerful country in the world, may give a small, weak-feeling child already some sense of security. And all the tradition that each image that is imprinted into this brain trails with it. One has to learn it in history and in Sunday school. I'm just picking on those two. The pride, not just feelings of security, but feelings of pride and attachment grow with being identified with an image. And then one learns images about others, the enemies, the infidels, the ones who have not yet or will never see the light, and the image begins to separate one from others, who don't have as good an affiliation, background, church, country as oneself has. Also, there's propaganda in images about other people. How bad they are, how avaricious, how untrustworthy, corrupt or whatever. All of this is learned. So that one lives in a world of images, not in a world of human beings, who are all so much alike, because this process takes place everywhere. In every country, in every family, between every mother and child, father and child. It just occurred to me, what if in this tiny spot of earth called Beirut, if all people dropped their images about who they were religiously, politically, nationally, historically, and their leaders dropped them too, there would not be any war. How could one shoot anyone if one doesn't have an image that this person is bad, has been bad for centuries, is after us, after my people, tries to get my land, which is God given to me. All of these traditions make for these images and barriers and hatreds and everlasting wars. You could say, well, how are you going to make the people of Beirut drop their images? I don't think that is a meaningful question. But a meaningful question may be, can images drop here in myself? Which means, can they be seen as they operate day in and day out, night in and night out, from moment to moment? Is one even willing to see them? Or only see some but not see the others? Those that give pleasure, one will not touch, one will not look at. It's not a conscious decision, but the pleasure is so overriding that the looking cannot take place. And the painful ones? Will one look at those? Does one even realize that when one is hurt, one is criticized for something one has done? What is it that smarts? What is it that hurts, arouses anger? Anger also hurts. Pain, the desire to lash out, or an incredible gush of self-pity. What is it when one is criticized? Let's say one has worked hard, done one's best, and one is criticized, maybe even unjustifiably. What is it that hurts? And not to theorize about it, but to watch it at the moment that this happens. And not to justify anything. Just this open, vulnerable looking in the midst of pain. If the image has already been hurt, there's already pain. If the attention is there before the hurt spreads all over the body, then it will not spread all over the body. Then one will see this image, and one will feel the attachment to it, and one may question it. It sounds a very laborious process. It can happen in an instant and be free of it. Because one doesn't need it. We don't know that. We think we need these images to be somebody. This has started so early in our life. Somebody who is loved, who is protected, who has a place in the group. All of this gives feelings of security. But one doesn't observe carefully the feelings of separation, pain, agony, hatred, retaliation, that all come from this attachment to self-image. In sitting on the mat quietly in a beautiful morning like this, sun flooding through the windows and these last few golden and copper leaves, the image may not stir. But maybe somebody writes a note finding fault with what one did, or somebody does something that just rubs one wrong. What is it that's being rubbed wrong? Can one immediately look at that? It's so vital. So vital to understand this process, because if it's not understood, it recycles over and over and over again. And this requires a questioning which leaves no stone unturned, no image unquestioned. If one is not aware of it, it functions. The symptoms of it being pride or arrogance or protectiveness, defensiveness, pain, anger. When these things happen, can one take them as flashing warning signals? They're a symptom of the underlying sickness, which is the image. You may feel sickness sounds too judgmental, so drop that word. We touched upon it yesterday, when you can say, all right, I got angry, I got hurt, pained, I'll just be with that pain, and then it'll go away. But there's something underlying that pain that hasn't been seen. Or hasn't been seen thoroughly. So thoroughly that it is just denuded. There it is. And if image is seen like that, it cannot maintain itself. Evaporates. Because if the seeing is not judgmental, if there's no division, then image is not needed. There may be a first glimpse that it's possible to live undivided as being no one special. What a relief. Not to have to repair and maintain and defend infinite numbers of images. This is where our energies leak and drain all the time. In this repair and defense and maintenance and acquisition of new images. Does this sound theoretical? Or does one see something which is actually happening in oneself? We have barely touched upon the fact that the brain also records images of what other people have said and done. If somebody has criticized us, we remember that, unless there is discerning attention of, if this is remembered and stored and carried around, it will prevent future direct relationship with that person, because one will relate via this remembered grudge. The inherent mechanism, and it's already in animals, it's in human beings, is to pay back. Maybe it's much more so in human beings because it is supported by thought. He did this to me, she did this to me. Just waiting for the right moment to make him or her feel how this has felt. This may be a rationalization, but it's such a primitive drive to retaliate. And if one has not been allowed to retaliate, because parents don't allow one to retaliate. Parents hit children, but children are not, in most cases, allowed to hit parents back. That's bad. There's an incredible confusion that must be set up in a child's mind. To be hit by a parent, but not to be allowed to hit back, which is the immediate response. Wanting to hit back and then told that this is bad, you do not hit your parent. So something is unfinished business and stored. And then when the right time comes, one hits one's own child. Or somebody who it is not bad to hit, somebody weaker or who nobody cares whether he or she is hit or not. So this propensity, this automatic recording of the brain of what somebody has done to one. And the blurring of this person when we get together again. One cannot openly meet, openly talk. This thing there comes in between. And it can be just a host of remembrances about someone. And yet this person, as he or she comes through the door this morning, may not be like that at all. Maybe this person has finished with it, but one can't see that because one sees it through the memory picture. And therefore relationship is tense or impossible. It's amazing how unless one then can talk with each other, open this up, image building goes on. The less one talks with somebody, the more one builds up images about that person. Or the less one exposes oneself directly to this person, the brain will provide images from the past. So can one become aware of what is carried in this memory bank? Actually, right at the moment that a grudge comes up, to look at it, to look at the whole process as it unfolds and and be done with it right then and there? Is that possible? So the relationship remains clear and unburdened. It's only when the relationship is clear and unburdened by grudges and memories that there can be a genuine affection. Goodwill. One can say, well, I can maybe see my grudges, the images I have of this person, and put them aside, lay them aside. But will that person do the same for me? You don't know. May not. Person may not. But does this mean that therefore I won't put mine aside, because very likely she won't put hers aside either? We think in those terms as this strong conditioning. I'll do for you if you do for me. If the Russians will disarm, then we'll disarm too, but they have to disarm first. How would it be to disarm individually or nationally and see what happens? Which means standing defenseless. I'm not talking now about nations, I'm talking about individuals again. We have defended all our life. Where has it gotten us? What does it really mean not to defend oneself, to just, and not get a new image of the defenseless one? It's not that. To really listen with all pores, the heart and mind open, and no image grabbed for protection or like a mask to be somebody. We don't have to be anybody, but we think we do, because we've been trained that way. And that training is totally arbitrary. Then maybe if fear comes up, an edginess or a terror, one person said, there's a real terror. Sometimes at a moment when there's really no clinging to anything, and a terror. What am I going to do? Where am I going to put my mind, one person said. That was a little bit a different thing. But can one also allow that terror to erupt? What is one terrorized about? One has never found out, because the moment terror strikes, one goes into the bunker, the air raid shelter. And one never finds out anything in the bunker. It's totally surrounded by defense, thick cement walls. So if it's scary not to be anybody, not to hide behind any image, superiority or inferiority, they're both images to hide behind. Where will that fear lead one? The language is dualistic. Doing it, being it, is not dualistic. There's no one to be led. No one to go any place. It's only images. So this ancient question, who am I, when there are no images? Or is one still clinging to the idea, now I have no images? That's a new me, a new image. To find out what that state is, in which there's nothing to attach to, no terror to hide from or to run away from, nothing to avoid. Doesn't the mind have to be quiet? Quiet in really not knowing. Not knowing, not expecting, not wanting. Just what is. Quiet in what is, not knowing what is. Somebody once asked, if I disappear, will I still continue to exist? What is it that disappears? This organism is there, it walks, it eats. There's a feeling of the incredibly fresh air, the warmth of the sunshine and the cool of the breeze. Beauty all around. Can that all be perceived out of stillness, quietness? Not wanting to bring oneself into this picture as somebody. That's what we do as soon as there's something, somehow or other we have to bring ourselves into the picture, into the conversation, into the whatever. Either directly in relationship or when one even walks alone. So quickly one has to remember a poem or be somebody in this. Can one just see that simply and that's all? Not let it take over the mind, because then there is this narrow little space again, which divides us from everything around us, including all the people, and divides us inwardly. images aren't bad and they aren't good, but can one be aware of them? So one isn't under their total influence. We will end here for today.